Here's our 2005 Ford F150. It just passed 60,000 miles, and I'm pretty sure the fluids on this truck have never been changed before. If you look at the rear differential, it's starting to seep out the gear oil, so let's go ahead and take care of that today. I want to remove the spare tire because it'll make this job a lot easier if it's not in the way. The tools that you're going to need are underneath the rear seat right here. You could easily raise up the seat to get better access to it, but even if you can't raise the seat, like for some reason you have something on top of it, you still have access to the tools. All you have to do is connect all of the tools together and put them in this hole that's to the right of your license plate. You'll see where it goes in, you really can't mess it up. At this point, you just turn everything counterclockwise and you should see the spare tire start to lower down so you could remove it off of the truck. Now we could pull the spare tire out of here and put it aside. Right now is actually a really good time to make sure that the spare tire has its proper PSI of air in it. And it doesn't hurt to clean up, it just makes the job go a lot smoother and just keep everything neater. Now if you go online looking for a differential cover or a gasket for your vehicle, you may find that there are 3 different size diff covers for these trucks. So that's why I'm measuring up the gasket, make sure I order the correct part before I start taking everything apart. And before we actually pull off that diff cover, we want to make sure that the fill plug is free, because if you can't get this fill plug out, then draining it is a bad idea. So make sure that you could get this thing free before you go any further with this job. As you can see, I tried my 3/8 impact. Of course, I had a super long extension, so that's not a good idea. But then I switched over to a shorter extension and a 1/2 impact gun. And as you can see, it did the job. It loosened up the fill plug, so that's great. I'm going to go ahead and leave it in place for now. I've got my oil pan ready, so I'm just going to go ahead and slide it underneath the truck. Now, this thing uses standard sockets. I think it's a 1/2 inch, and this is my entire kit of 1/2 inch sockets. Yeah, not very often have to use those. Anyway, as you can see, I'm using my impact gun, and that's because it's going to speed up the process. Plus, the vibrations from the impact gun really help with rusted on fasteners. I said these things are 1/2 inch, and if you only had metric sockets, I think a 13mm might work, but it's really important to use the proper sockets if you don't want to damage anything. You may have noticed that the first bolt I loosened up top, I just left it in place loosely, because once that diff cover breaks its bond, we don't want it to just fall off. To separate the differential cover, I basically use 3 different tools: a razor blade, a small prying tool, and a gasket scraper. You're going to have to work at it for a while until it finally breaks free, but it will come off. Now, the best advice I could give you is be really careful what you're doing. If you're planning on using a gasket here, try not to scratch the surface of the housing. See, because if you're using some sort of silicone, it doesn't really matter. I still advise try not to gouge it or scratch it, but the silicone is way more forgiving with those type of things, and it doesn't matter so much. But if you're going to use just a gasket, it's really important that the surface of where it's going to try to seal is nice and flat. I hope that makes sense. And naturally, cue the baby making music.
Girl, I just want to say, you looking thick in them jeans. I like them big. I like them chunky. I like them round. Oh yeah, giggity, giggity.
There is a small sump at the bottom here, and you're going to see I'm trying to scoop it out with my hand, and at some point I'm going to use a vacuum pump to try to suck out the rest of it. So just keep that in mind that you try to get all of that out of there. There is a magnet inside of here as well, and it's just there to try to collect any metal shavings that might happen. That's perfectly normal. If you see like little fine, it's almost like a powder metal, and that's what the magnet is there for, to try to catch all of that. If you find big chunks of metal in here, then you have bigger problems to worry about. But this is the magnet. So let's go over to the workbench and have a closer look at it. You can see it just looks like a bunch of goo that's on here, and really it's just fine metal shavings, perfectly normal. So just go ahead and clean it off and set it aside for now. Now I'm just going to use some brake parts cleaner and compressed air to get this whole housing as clean as I could possibly get it. Don't forget to blow out all of the holes where the bolts are going to go, and now it's time to cover up the actual differential. So I'm just going to use some brand new rags I have laying around here to cover everything up while we try to get the old gasket material off of the housing. I'm going to start with the razor blade here and get the big chunks off. I started using the 3M white bristle brush for removing gasket material, and it's usually my go-to, but in this case it really wasn't working too well, so I had to switch over to this pad on my die grinder here, and it's more or less kind of like a Scotch-Brite pad, so it's not aggressive enough to start removing any metal from the housing, but it's just aggressive enough to remove the gasket, and it worked out perfectly. Now that everything is cleaned and dried, let's not forget about the magnet, so let's go ahead and put that in right now. Let me start off by apologizing about my camera. I didn't realize the exposure was set so high, that's why it looks super bright. I tried to do what I can in the editing to make it more tolerable, so I do apologize. But guys, this is the magnet that was sent with the differential cover kit, and look how cheap this thing is. It doesn't even want to stick to the cover itself. It doesn't even want a magnet. They have one job. So this thing is pretty much trash. Look how it just bends. Go ahead and throw that thing in the garbage and just use the original magnet that came with the truck. And I'm going to be using this Loctite high-tech stick. It's not an adhesive, it's not a silicone or anything. It's really, just think of it like a Elmer's school glue, and it's made to hold the gasket in place so it doesn't fall off while you're trying to install everything. But I like to put it on both sides of the gasket, and that really helps. I seem to have really great success with this, with putting this high-tech stuff on both sides of the gasket. As you can see, I even put a little bit on the housing side right at the bottom, and it proved to be very successful every time I do it like this, and this is no exception. This thing has no leak at all, guys. I can tell you from the future. So go ahead and get everything lined up and start putting all the bolts into the differential cover. After torquing all of the bolts, I like to go around the entire cover one more time just to make sure they're all correct. Now this is the fluid I'm going to be using. It's a full synthetic 75W-140. It's the gear oil that goes in this specific vehicle. It's a new flex fill bag. As you can see, it's not in a standard like plastic container that you would normally get these things in. And the whole purpose of it is they fit in tighter places and they allow you to actually get the job done without having to use a pump or something. It's my first time using something like this. And once you get it in the hole, you just basically start squeezing the bag and just get it to go in. So honestly, it's not that bad. It works pretty well. I'm gonna have a little bit of a leak right here, but that's my fault because I actually cut the nozzle a little bit too short, so some of it managed to just get on the thread and start to leak out right here. It's not that the differential is full yet, because this is my first bag. You're gonna find that you can't get all the fluid out. There's still a good amount inside of here, but that's not a big issue. All you have to do is grab that fluid and empty it into your next bag, and that's it. But I do have this new tool. It's a pump for fluids like this. You can use it for extracting or for putting fluid into a differential or anything else you're working on. So you could actually pour the fluid right into this giant syringe from the top, but I found it easier and cleaner because you tend to make a big mess with this thing, to just put it into the bag how I did there and suck it up. And now we're just gonna go over to the differential and start to push it in. Now in my case, this thing took almost exactly 3 quarts of oil before it got filled and it started to drip the fluid out. You'll know when it's filled when you start to see the gear oil start to drip out like this. So at this point, go ahead, put the plug back in it, and this one does have a magnet as well, so I cleaned off the magnet and I put a little bit of thread sealant on the thread. You can see that white paste. Go ahead, snug it down and just give it a good snug. You don't got to kill it. And after that's in place, I like to hit everything with brake parts cleaner and compressed air and make sure everything's nice and dry, so that in the future, if it does develop a leak, you can identify it pretty easy. After driving the truck around for a few days, you could see the diff cover is nice and dry, nothing is dripping or leaking, and if we look at the ground underneath the truck where we normally park it, it's nice and dry as well. So this is what I like to see. It's another repair checked off the list, and that's going to be it for this one, guys. So like always, thanks for watching.